Ali MacGraw just broke her silence. After 50 years of protecting Steve McQueen's memory, the woman the world once called Hollywood's sweetheart has finally told the truth. Not about their fame, their chemistry, or their films, but about the nightmare she survived behind closed doors. To the world, they were untouchable, the perfect pair. He was the king of cool. She was the queen of grace. Yet when the lights went out and the cameras stopped rolling, everything changed. What began as a whirlwind romance soon became a cage of jealousy, fear, and control. Friends disappeared, scripts were turned down, and the woman who had captured America's heart slowly vanished into his shadow. Now at 85, Ali MacGraw is done pretending. She's revealing the truth she once swore she'd take to her grave. The truth about the man who loved her, hurt her, and nearly destroyed her spirit. Because what she lived through wasn't a love story, it was survival. In 1972, two of Hollywood's most magnetic stars collided on the set of The Getaway. Steve McQueen was already a legend, the rebel every man wanted to be, and every woman wanted to tame. Ali MacGraw was the new face of intelligence and beauty, fresh from her Oscar nomination for Love Story. Their chemistry was immediate, electric, and impossible to hide. The cameras captured more than a performance. They captured the beginning of one of Hollywood's most notorious romances. At first it looked like passion rewritten for a new generation. He admired her elegance. She was drawn to his danger. They couldn't stay apart, even though both were married. Ali to Paramount producer Robert Evans, Steve to actress Neil Adams. The affair became front-page news. Within months both marriages ended, and the tabloids crowned them the most beautiful disaster in Hollywood. Behind that glamour, cracks were already showing. Steve's jealousy was legendary. He demanded loyalty on his terms, and had a reputation for tracking his partner's every move. Friends of the couple would later recall how the intensity that made their love thrilling also made it volatile. He wanted her at home, devoted only to him. Ali, who had built her career on independence, began to bend under that demand. When they married in 1973, photographers swarmed their Malibu ceremony. The image of the smiling bride and swaggering groom became an emblem of Hollywood passion. But even that day, McQueen was uneasy. He hated the attention, mistrusted the press, and resented the idea that Ali might outshine him. The same fame that united them became the spark of constant tension. Soon after, he insisted she stop working. Roles that could have secured her future, films offered by major directors, were turned down under his pressure. He told her Hollywood wasn't safe, that men there couldn't be trusted, that she didn't need the spotlight anymore. What he meant was that he couldn't stand to share it. Her professional world shrank to the walls of their ranch, where his moods dictated the tone of every day. In public, they played their parts flawlessly, the handsome rebel and the devoted wife. Behind the gates there were shouting matches, slammed doors, and nights where she sat alone, waiting for him to return from long rides or longer parties. Those who visited said the air around them was tense, unpredictable. His charm could fill a room. His temper could clear it. Ali tried to believe she could love the rage out of him. Instead, she found herself erasing pieces of who she was to keep the peace. The gossip columns continued to paint them as Hollywood's hottest couple. Interviews described their marriage as passionate, unconventional, exciting. None of those words captured the fear that was beginning to take hold. Steve's control deepened as his trust in her faded. He read her scripts, questioned her calls, demanded to know where she went. Every gesture of affection came with an undercurrent of suspicion. Every smile hid exhaustion. By the time The Towering Inferno made him the highest-paid actor in the world, Ali had disappeared from the screen entirely. To outsiders, she looked like the picture of devotion. Inside, she was fading, from star to shadow, from wife to captive. The world saw a golden couple glowing with fame and power. Only Ali knew that the brightness came from fire, not light. As the first thrill of marriage faded, The balance of power between Ali MacGraw and Steve McQueen shifted entirely. What the world called devotion was, in truth, control disguised as love. McQueen had always demanded authority on screen. Now he demanded it at home. Every script, every friend, every phone call passed through his approval. When she hesitated, he reminded her who paid the bills, who protected her from Hollywood wolves, who knew best. The same confidence that had built his image as the ultimate rebel became a weapon. He turned inward on his wife. Those close to them saw it early. Invitations to dinner were quietly declined. Friends from her love story years stopped calling after being met with McQueen's suspicion. He told Ali the industry was poison, that people only wanted to use her. It sounded protective at first, until she realized he was cutting every lifeline she had. He wanted her to himself, completely unchallenged, unseen. By the mid-70s, her social world had collapsed to their ranch, and a handful of his racing buddies who rarely spoke when she entered the room. Isolation soon turned emotional. He kept the house under his rules, his music, his friends, his schedule. If she questioned it, the charm that had once melted her disappeared behind icy silence. The man America adored could explode without warning. Doors slammed, engines roared, apologies followed, and the cycle began again. Ali learned that calm depended on surrender. She dressed the way he liked, stayed home when he asked, avoided anyone he didn't trust. What looked like a glamorous retreat was in truth confinement. Industry insiders noticed her absence. Paramount executives tried to lure her back. Scripts from top directors were quietly delivered to her agent. McQueen intercepted them, sometimes reading them aloud, mocking the dialogue, insisting she was too good for that junk. In reality, he feared any co-star who might remind her she had choices. When one major studio offered her a leading role opposite Paul Newman, McQueen laughed and said no wife of his would ever kiss another man on camera again. The film went on to win awards. Ali stayed home. His jealousy reached absurd extremes. He timed her errands, questioned receipts, demanded to know who had called when he was away. On movie sets, he ordered assistants to report if any man spoke to her for too long. She learned to shrink herself, to speak softly, to anticipate his moods before they erupted. Fear replaced affection. She began to measure love by the length of calm between storms. To outsiders, McQueen remained the swaggering icon. The racing leathers, the motorcycles, the perfect smirk. Interviews painted him as loyal, protective, passionate. None of them saw the exhaustion behind Ali's smile when she stood beside him at premieres. She still loved him, but she was no longer sure who she was loving, the man she'd met on the Getaway or the ghost that fame had created. Friends later said she looked hollow, as if she were fading from the inside out. By 1976, even McQueen's success couldn't mask the strain. He was filming less, drinking more, trusting no one. Ali's attempts to reason with him only deepened his paranoia. The life that had begun as a glamorous partnership now felt like survival training. Every conversation carried risk. Every smile was a performance. The woman who once symbolized independence for an entire generation had become a prisoner in her own story, and deep down she knew that leaving him might be the only way to stay alive. By the late 1970s, the facade of the McQueen-MacGraw marriage had shattered beyond repair. The smiles for the cameras had vanished. What remained was a house divided by fear, silence, and mistrust. Steve's jealousy had turned from verbal outbursts into constant surveillance. He kept tabs on her every movement, questioning the smallest details: a phone call, a letter, even a glance at a dinner guest. The man who had once swept her off her feet now treated her like an intruder in her own life. Ali had learned to sense the shift in his mood before he spoke. The smallest things set him off. A magazine interview mentioning her name, a script mailed to the house, a casual compliment from a friend. He would slam his fists against tables, accuse her of betrayal, then disappear for nights on end. She never knew if he was out drinking, racing, or with another woman. When he came home, the apologies would come too. Flowers, charm, and promises that things would change. But they never did. The pattern became her reality. Hollywood insiders whispered about the chaos. On set, Steve was erratic, often showing up late, or demanding rewrites. He was losing trust in directors, agents, even his closest friends. The pressure of stardom, mixed with drugs and alcohol, made him volatile. Ollie tried to help him, believing love could calm the storm, but it only made her smaller. Her attempts to soothe him were twisted into proof that she was hiding something. If she went quiet, he said she was distant. If she spoke, he said she was defiant. There was no winning, only surviving. Those who saw her during that period describe a woman drained of life. She had once been confident and luminous, but now she moved carefully, speaking in half sentences, as if every word had to pass through a filter of fear. Her friends begged her to leave. She told them they didn't understand, that Steve could be kind, that he needed her. The truth was harder to admit. She was afraid of what would happen if she did go. McQueen had a reputation for control that went far beyond his home. Even the men who admired him knew he had a temper that could destroy careers. The final collapse began quietly. Steve's affairs were no longer secrets. He flirted openly, then justified it as his right. Ollie's heartbreak turned to numbness. One night after another explosive argument, she left the house and drove until dawn. For the first time she felt peace. No shouting, no accusations, just silence. That morning she realized that love had become something unrecognizable, a wound that refused to heal. When she returned, Steve acted as if nothing had happened. That was when she knew it was over. The man she had married no longer existed. In his place stood someone consumed by power and insecurity. She told him she couldn't live like that anymore. His response was cold. Then dawn set. It wasn't a dramatic ending. No screaming, no pleading. Just the quiet realization that the nightmare had to end. She packed her things and walked away from the house that had once felt like safety. The tabloids called it another Hollywood breakup, but those close to Ollie knew it was something deeper, an escape. In the weeks that followed, she struggled with shame and disbelief. She had survived one of the most admired men in Hollywood, but at the cost of herself. He called her weak. She called it survival. By the time she looked back, the woman from Love Story was gone, replaced by someone who finally understood what the word freedom meant and what it cost to earn it. When Ollie MacGraw finally walked away from Steve McQueen, she didn't leave with anger. She left with exhaustion. The years of control, the endless jealousy, the quiet humiliation, it had all stripped her of the woman she once was. But freedom came at a cost. In 1978, the divorce made headlines across the world. The press treated it as a Hollywood story of two fiery stars who couldn't make it work. What they didn't see was the woman quietly trying to put herself back together after years of emotional erosion. She moved into a small home in Malibu, a far cry from the sprawling ranch she had shared with McQueen. For the first time in years there was silence. No shouting, no orders, just space to breathe. Yet that silence was haunted. Even after leaving him, she still flinched at sudden noises, still checked the clock without realizing, still wondered what she'd done wrong. Survival had become a reflex. Friends noticed how fragile she was. She drank more than before, often hiding from the very industry that once worshipped her. The phone rang with offers, producers eager to capitalize on her heartbreak, but she turned them all down. She wasn't ready to play another role, not when she was still learning who she really was. Hollywood, for all its glamour, felt poisonous now. Every studio handshake reminded her of Steve's control. Every male gaze reminded her of what she had endured to please one man. Meanwhile, McQueen's life spun in the opposite direction. He plunged deeper into excess, racing, drinking, chasing younger women, burning through money and trust. His health declined, but he refused to admit it. Even after their divorce, he tried to control the narrative, telling reporters that Ali had been the problem, that she didn't understand his world. For years, she said nothing. She refused to defend herself, choosing silence over another public fight. That silence became her armor. When she finally spoke again, it wasn't in interviews or memoirs, but in private conversations with close friends. She admitted that leaving him had nearly broken her, but staying would have destroyed her completely. She said she still loved parts of him, his brilliance, his humor, his childlike wonder, but she no longer confused that love with safety. For Ali, the real healing began not when she left Steve, but when she stopped blaming herself for the damage he caused. In the early 80s, she turned away from Hollywood altogether. She found solace in New Mexico, where she built a quieter life rooted in yoga, community, and spiritual study. There she reconnected with herself, not the actress, not the ex-wife, but the woman who had survived one of Hollywood's most powerful men. When McQueen died of cancer in 1980, she grieved him deeply. She said she wished peace for him, but she also acknowledged that he had left scars she would carry for life. Years later, when she finally began to talk publicly about their marriage, her tone wasn't vengeful. It was reflective, measured, and painfully honest. She didn't use words like abuse or victim. She didn't need to. Her story said enough. She spoke about control, about fear, about how easy it was to lose yourself when you love someone who mistakes possession for passion. By the time she reached 85, the public's fascination with their love story had turned nostalgic. But for Ali, it would never be nostalgia. It was survival. The escape wasn't dramatic, but it saved her life. And in her quiet way, she made sure the world would finally know why she had to leave. Today, at 85, Ali MacGraw speaks with a calm that only comes from survival. Her voice is softer now, but her words cut deeper than they ever could in her youth. When she finally began to discuss her marriage to Steve McQueen, it wasn't to reopen old wounds, it was to reclaim the truth that had been rewritten by decades of myth. The world had immortalized them as the perfect couple, the rebel and the romantic, fire and grace. But the woman who lived that story knows that legends are often built on silence. She no longer hides what it cost her. McQueen's charm, she admits, could disarm anyone. He could make a stranger feel like the only person in the room. Yet behind that charisma was a man consumed by fear, of betrayal, of aging, of losing control. Ali describes how that fear turned into rage, how the same energy that made him magnetic on screen made him destructive in private. She doesn't exaggerate or dramatize. She simply lays bare the pattern that defined their years together. What shocks people most is not the violence or infidelity, but the subtle erosion of identity. She talks about how she stopped reading scripts, stopped seeing friends, stopped laughing at things that once brought her joy. It wasn't one grand moment of collapse, she says. It was thousands of tiny compromises that added up to a disappearance. "I forgot who I was," she once admitted. Not as confession, but as recognition. It's a truth that resonates with anyone who's ever loved someone who demanded everything. Her reflection on McQueen is complex. She refuses to reduce him to a villain, even as she exposes the nightmare she endured. She speaks of his brilliance, his insecurities, his loneliness. She acknowledges that fame and fear twisted him into something he couldn't control. But she also makes one thing clear: understanding him doesn't excuse what he did. You can love a person's spirit and still know that their presence nearly destroyed yours. That line has stayed with audiences because it's not anger, it's release. Ali has become an unexpected voice for survival, especially among women who grew up watching her films and envied her marriage. They write to her, telling her that her honesty gave them permission to speak about their own pain. She often says that if her story helps someone else walk away sooner than she did, then it was worth telling. For years she was portrayed as the woman who gave up everything for love. Now she is the woman who proved that walking away was the bravest act of all. Her relationship with Hollywood remains distant but not bitter. She rarely attends award shows or reunions, preferring the quiet life she built in Santa Fe. Friends describe her home as peaceful, filled with books, dogs, and sunlight, not reminders of the past. The woman who once measured her worth through another person's gaze has learned the power of solitude. When asked if she ever truly forgave McQueen, she pauses and says she forgave herself first. And that is the truth she can finally tell. She survived not because she was fearless, but because she was done living in fear. The nightmare is over, but its lessons remain. Her story is no longer about the man she loved. It's about the woman who found her way back. Decades later, the legend of Steve McQueen still overshadows the truth Ali MacGraw carries. Fans remember the movies, the cars, the danger, not the silence that filled their home, or the woman who paid the price for his fame. For years, she let that version stand, unwilling to fight a myth the world worshipped. But time has a way of clearing the smoke. Now at 85, Ali's story isn't about revenge, it's about clarity. She survived Hollywood's most magnetic man and walked out with her soul intact. That survival, she says, is her greatest achievement. Not the awards, not the fame, but the courage to speak after years of being quiet. The truth she shares isn't meant to destroy his legacy, it's meant to reclaim hers. When she looks back now, she doesn't see glamour or tragedy. She sees a woman who endured what others romanticized and lived to tell the truth. The cameras may have stopped rolling, but for Ali MacGraw the final act is still unfolding, one of peace, strength, and freedom finally earned. For more emotional stories, check out this video.